All right. I think we can go ahead and get started, and more folks might trickle in a few minutes in, but this webinar will also be recorded and sent out to anyone who can't make it, just as a reminder if anyone needs to hop early. All right. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Abby Smith. My background's in environmental management, and I've been at Upstream Tech for about 5 years now in a few different roles, currently the product lead for Lens. And we are all here today to talk about Lens Lookout, which is our latest feature to help you spot and respond to changes on land that you're monitoring. In terms of agenda, we'll start with some context about Upstream Tech and Lens, and then we'll dive into Lens Lookout. We'll talk about how it works and spin through, I think I've got 5 or 6 different examples of how it can be applied to answer different kinds of questions or concerns that you might have around monitoring, and then we will hold a little bit of time at the end for questions. All right. As a reminder, you should see a Q&A option at the bottom of your Zoom window. So feel free to submit questions or comments as we go along. We will cover what we can at the end of the presentation or reach back out to you directly if we can't cover your question live. So for anyone who is new to Upstream Tech, I did want to take a minute just to introduce ourselves. We are a mission-driven company that is passionate about environmental conservation and resource management, and our team is an incredibly talented group of folks, experts in different fields, and we have built 2 products together. Lens, which is about providing easy access to remote sensing data and tools for monitoring, and that's the focus of today's webinar. And we also have a product called Hydro Forecast, which leverages AI to support stream flow forecasting, which you can learn more about on our website. So Lens is all about lowering the barriers to entry for remote monitoring. We made Lens to make remote data more accessible and interpretable for everyone, especially those who have faced budget constraints or maybe technical constraints in accessing Earth observation data. We work with a bunch of different incredible partners who are protecting places and managing projects all over the world with Lens. So to quickly recap, what can you do in Lens specifically? For context, there are several satellite data providers, and this is a growing list of providers, both commercial and public, that offer valuable insights about how our Earth is changing. And you can go directly to sources like Planet or Airbus. They have wonderful imagery, but they also have very high minimum purchases, and it usually requires some level of technical expertise to even store and interact with data in addition to paying for that data. So it's in the past been a barrier to entry for many conservation organizations, especially nonprofits. So what Lens does is we aggregate imagery and data from all of the different major providers in one affordable platform. So once you sign up for Lens, public data is free. Commercial imagery can be ordered from many of these different vendors from their archive for 4 to 6 cents per acre with no minimum purchase. And you can easily view available imagery for your areas of interest, see how much it costs, and purchase it straight from Lens. So our goal is to kind of combine the archives and the resources that are available from all of the different vendors and model data sets that exist out there for different use cases, and just help organizations get all that in one place without breaking the bank. We also have different tools to help you spot changes and analyze trends over time. So that might be as simple as visually comparing 2 different time steps or viewing data on a chart if you want to understand trends in a more quantitative way. So quantitative, qualitative insights, we have different tools to kind of help you understand at a high level, how is your area of interest changing and what does that mean for your monitoring and stewardship and next steps. We also have annotation and reporting functionalities, so you and your team can document what you're observing based on the remote data or the different analytical insights, and you can pull that into a PDF report that you can then use for your own record keeping, regulatory submissions, share a link with stakeholders. What you're seeing on the right here is a share link, so you can give folks insight into how an area is changing our current conditions on the ground. And to just kind of tie this up with a bow, the reason that many organizations choose Lens is because it has significant time and cost savings. For instance, the Nature Conservancy in California reported a 37% reduction in staff time, allowing for more flexible and strategic use of their stewardship team's time. So that's kind of a trend, a story that we've heard time and time again, how much more efficient and effective it can be to make remote monitoring part of your toolkit. I also do want to stress, though, that remote monitoring and remote sensing data is, in our opinion, a complement to, not a replacement for field visits. So it helps provide new insights into hard to access areas and allows you to have broader coverage than you maybe could do in person on the ground in a field visit. But we still think field visits are essential. We just want to kind of help you make those more focused and effective so that you can do as much conservation action as you can with your time. All right, so that was a bunch of context. We're here to talk about Lens Lookout. So for a little bit of background about why we created this feature, Lens Lookout was designed to automate and enhance continuous monitoring. So in short, we really want to help you protect people and places. And we know that remote monitoring is more efficient than in-person monitoring alone, but even still, sifting through the large repository of imagery and data that's coming in, for some of our sources, it's every 5 days, and that's incredibly tedious to maybe impossible, depending on the scale of the areas that you're stewarding. And so Lens Lookout leverages those high frequency data sets in particular. I think that's really where it shines, from public sources. So you don't have to worry about this running up a huge bill for you, but it allows you to scan through those pieces of data as they come in automatically and highlight what matters to you. This also builds on another feature that we've had for some time called vegetation alerts. Longtime Lens users will be very familiar with this feature. It's helped a number of our customers detect things like unexpected timber harvest or shoreline erosion. And it basically lets you know when there's been a significant divergence in vegetation vigor patterns compared to prior years. It's incredibly valuable, but we were thinking about how can we make this more flexible for the growing list of data sets that are available in the Lens library. It didn't really make sense for us to scale that one by one to have a preset alert for every single data set. And we also know how much those threshold values vary geographically. Some people might want a really sensitive alert. Some people might want to only know when there's been a dramatic change on their land. And so we wanted to create something that was a lot more flexible. And that's why we created Lookouts. So Lookouts is designed to work with any and all data sets from the library. So you can add the data sets that are relevant to you and then create a customizable policy. So this is, I think, enough time on the slides. I will pop out of this deck and then we can talk through a little bit more about Lookouts in action. I'm going to skip through the normal demo and assume that you've already got a Lens account, you've added your areas of interest, you're rocking and rolling, and we will head straight into the map view. So I'll just open any of these properties will work. To orient you, if you're new to Lens, you've got your property that's outlined in white here. We have preloaded any publicly available imagery for your site already. If you want to order imagery, you can do that on the left side here from any of these commercial vendors. You can annotate any changes that you might have seen, like tree growth or a new shed that's been constructed. You can do analysis, create reports, etc. So you'll see the lookout pane on the left side here. That's what we'll mostly be talking about today. There are going to be a couple of presets. That vegetation drop alert that I mentioned earlier, that's always going to be a preset for you. So all you have to do is toggle that on if you want to use that feature. We also have a preset for changes in parcel ownership. So this is leveraging our partnership with the folks at Regrid who have US tax parcel data. And if you want to know when ownership changes on a parcel that overlaps your property, you can go ahead and toggle that on. But the way that you would create a new lookout policy is by creating a policy with this button here, and then you'll see a bunch of different options. So you can give your policy a name. Maybe I want to understand when green up is happening on this property. You can choose from any of the data sets that are loaded in your portfolio, and then you can set thresholds. I'm going to pop out of this for just 1 second to kind of build some context. As I mentioned, this is based on the data sets that you have already added for your property. So if you haven't added any of these data sets, or if you want to add new ones, we recently dropped this precipitation data set, which is really exciting, but you can go in here and add anything to your portfolios from the library. And if you're wondering why something's not appearing on the lookout dropdown, that's why. The other thing you might want to consider before you hop into creating a new lookout policy is just building a little bit of context and confidence around what would be a good value for my threshold. So for example, if I'm interested in vegetation vigor, I'll just pull up a scene. We can see the dark green showing areas of high vegetation vigor, yellow, low vegetation vigor, white is those pond, lake areas that we saw in the true color image. But if I want to understand what would be an appropriate number for that threshold, because it's somewhat abstract, you can try this range filter that we have. This is just a handy way to see if I'm interested in green up, maybe I want to see values above 0.37. It's all a little bit of an art more than a science, I would say, and something that you can always continue to iterate on and edit over time. But this is one way to get a sense for what might be a good threshold value for you. I'll go ahead and close out of that. You can also use the analysis charts. I've got one saved here, and on hover, I can see the values for each of these different points in time. So if you're trying to compare this to something that may have happened in the past, this allows you to say, the highest values that I'm seeing on this site are around 0.6. So I don't want to set a threshold that's above that, just given the nature of what's happening on this property. All right. So popping back into the policy creation modal, you've got your data set selected, you've given it a name, and then you can just drag any of these values to the number that you want, or you can type it in directly. You can also choose if you want the threshold above or below. So if I'm looking for green up, I'm going to want that threshold to be above. If I'm looking for a drop in vegetation, I might want it to be below. And then you can also choose a percentage of your property. So it's unlikely that your property is only one thing, or there's like only one value on your property. So you might want to know when 20% of your property has these conditions met, and that would be a signal for you that something is changing and that you want to go in and investigate. You can also select the number of scenes. So this can be helpful if you really want to avoid noise. For example, if you're worried about cloud cover, maybe you want 2 or 3 scenes where those conditions are met consecutively before you're notified, just so that you don't have as many false positives. If it's a really concerning change that you're worried about, you might want that to be one, recognizing there may be noise that isn't captured by our cloud masks. And then you can also add a description. So I might want to say, I'm interested in, let's see, how trees are growing in planted areas. Totally optional. I think this is helpful if you are collaborating with other folks on your team, and you might want to just give them a little bit of background into why you created this policy. And then you can go to the enrollment step. So if this is something that is going to be relevant for a bunch of different properties in your portfolio, you can add them here. If it's only relevant for the one, that's also fine. You can change this later, but just kind of a handy way for you to quickly enroll in bulk. All right, and then you click finish. It will create the policy, enroll my property, and that means that Lens is now, as of today, going to start analyzing any incoming data from the latest satellite feeds so that it will review whether those conditions that you set are met and then let you know if they are. All right. That was a lot, but I think it might be helpful to just talk through a bunch of different examples of how this can look in different scenarios that might spark some ideas on your end for what might be relevant for you. So here is an example of a lake in California. This lake has a seasonal pattern of algal blooms. I can see that in analysis charts that my colleagues have created already on this site. I can see that if I look into some of the data directly, this is a scene from the peak of summer when there was an algal bloom event happening, and we can see that really clearly visually. But maybe I want to know in the summer, I want to know as soon as a bloom event begins. And so I might want to create a lookout policy for that, which I did. And so we'll go ahead and click into this example. This is what it will look like when you do receive that notification. So you'll see it on the left side on the lookout pane, and then you can review what has changed. It will append the scene that the change occurred in and let you know approximately where the change happened. So you can see on hover, these red areas are the places where chlorophyll values were higher than my threshold. And this makes it really easy for me to just review and see, yeah, that does look like an early indicator in June that there's an algal bloom event that's starting that is probably going to expand to other parts of the lake in the coming weeks, and I may want to take some action. I'll also, I meant to flag this earlier, I'll also flag, you can see when these changes occur from the recent activity on the homepage, and you will also receive an email. So you don't have to proactively go in here and look every time that you think something might have happened. We'll be sure to proactively notify you. All right, the next example I have is preserve in Madagascar. This is a really biodiverse area. It provides habitat for a bunch of different plants and animals. And there was some slash and burn burns that occurred on this property in the fall of 2022. We can see those here. I can click into some visuals that my colleague captured. This is from a couple of years ago, but we can imagine how risky it might be for such a biodiverse area to have slash and burn agriculture happening. And we want to make sure that we are notified in the future if an event like this ever does occur. So in order to do that, I created a slash and burn lookout policy. Actually, I'll just reopen this in edit mode just so that you can see what I did here. So I chose the burn index Sentinel-2 data set. I chose a threshold that I thought would be appropriate, just given what I had seen from that earlier historical example above. And I really wanted to know even small areas can be the start of something risky. So I made that percentage of the property very low here. So that's how I set this up. And then we can see an example here where those conditions were met and I received a notification. And I can see really easily on the map where those burn index values were higher. This is, of course, a little bit abstract. So something that I might want to do in reviewing this is look at how does this compare to maybe Sentinel-2 true color. And I can click through here. And this just allows me to build some confidence around, does this seem like an appropriate change that was detected? Could it be a cloud? I just want to make sure that I'm not overreacting before I get a little bit more confidence and context. So it does indeed look like these areas that are so high on the burn index data set are pretty dark on the true color as well. It's a little bit hard to tell because this isn't the highest spatial resolution data. So as a next step, I might even want to order imagery for this area. So I could even order a partial area. I just want to select this part of my property and understand based on one of these commercial sources what is happening, and is this a real risk that I might need to follow up on. So those are a few of the things that you might want to do. If it turns out that it's really not something you're worried about, it's false positive, or it's just not something that you need to worry about. You can click dismiss and make that alert go away. Or you can save it as a note for you or your colleagues to review later. All right. The next example, oops, spoiler alert, I will show you that in just a minute. The next example is, let's see, here we go, regrowth after a timber harvest. So this is an area in Montana where there was a major harvest event that occurred. You can see that really clearly in the historic imagery here. And in this context, I want to track regrowth and recovery on this site. I want to know when vegetation vigor reaches above a certain level that indicates that it's maybe on par with vegetation vigor prior to this harvest event. So to do that, I'm going to go over to the lookouts pane. I've already made this regrowth policy, but we can go ahead and open that up just to see what I selected here. In this case, I used enhanced vegetation. This is really similar to vegetation vigor. You can read more about this in the library, but it tends to be a little bit more stable compared to vegetation vigor, which fluctuates a lot and can have a lot of seasonal variation. Enhanced vegetation is, I think, a nice one if you're interested in those large scale trends. So that's why I chose it here. Threshold value is pretty high, and I wanted to know when it was above that threshold of vegetation vigor for half the property. And you can see this notification here where those conditions were met, and I can see really clearly why that happened. It makes sense to me. It outlined the areas where I'm seeing the highest vegetation vigor, which is a good sign for the recovery of this site. All right. I think I have one more. And then we'll open it up for questions. So I also wanted to call out that lookouts can be created for the Planet Forest Carbon Data Package. This is something you purchase through Lens, but it's updated annually, and they're getting ready to launch a quarterly option at 3-meter resolution. So this is a really great use case for lookouts as well. And I have a few examples here to share. So this is one where I was really interested in canopy height decline. This is a forest carbon project, hypothetically, and I'm really concerned about any loss in canopy cover or canopy height or carbon values. And so if you want to create a policy based on any of those, you can go down here and select canopy height and choose whatever the value is. I want to know when the trees on average are less than 14 meters high across 5% of my property, which might indicate that there's been a cutting, and you can enroll a policy like that. So that's what I did here. You can see there was a canopy height decline. Historically, this was backfilled to 2019, just so that I had a few examples to show. And same thing with carbon loss. So this really helps me kind of identify where on my site these changes are occurring. And if I want to save this as a note, I can also grab the geometry of this notification and then export that in some way if I want to do any kind of follow-up. But this is just a great way to kind of get a pulse check on how are forests changing on your site. And then let's see, the last thing that is a little bit of a sneak preview. Up until now, the lookout creation step has been available for any of our range data sets. But as of today, we are getting ready to launch the ability to do category lookouts for things like land cover or global forest loss. So here you can say, I want to know when trees converted to rangeland, or maybe I want to know when anything changed from anything. That's also an option. So you can create a policy for that too. These data sets are not updated quite as often, so you would only expect to get notified once a year when those changes happen. But this is just a great way, again, for you to get a pulse check of where have changes occurred on my property. Here's an example where I was interested in understanding where was forest lost, and it outlined that in a really clean way for this example. All right. So yeah, hopefully this illustrates that the possibilities are pretty endless for this feature. We've seen folks already using this for getting notified if their area has dry ground to kind of help them find an optimal time for a field visit in a swampy area, for example. We've seen folks use this for green up as an indicator of cover cropping, and they'll turn that toggle on in the spring and then turn it off in the summer. You can use our new precipitation data set. So if you want to know when there's been more than 3 months with less than an inch of rain, for example, that might be an indicator of drought conditions or wildfire risk. It's very, very flexible, and we're thrilled to be able to make this available for the different kinds of data sets in the library. And then as we continue to add to the Lens library, make sure that this is available for those too. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen and look at the Q&A section for the last couple of minutes. And I'll also flag if you have thoughts about this feature, if you have ideas, this, like everything in Lens, is a work in progress. And so we're always iterating, we're trying to make things better all the time. And we love when we get to hear from y'all about what you want to be able to do in Lens that you can't do today, so that we can think about how to build that into the future. All right. I have one question that says, can you talk about the parcel ownership change button I saw on your screen? Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Stuart. I'll pop back into screen share. I think there was an example over here that I was showing. So this is one of our, what we call a preset lookout. So you don't have to configure this in any way. This is just available to turn on or off. And we have a partnership with Regrid to pull in parcel data across the US. So you can see that here. I'll go ahead and turn it on. And you can see on hover the parcel ID, the owner of that parcel, and the address. And so we are kind of linked up with Regrid. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for letting me know that I'm not sharing my screen. Apologies. So if you turn on this overlay, you can see on hover more information about each parcel that overlaps your property or even beyond your property. It loads across the US. And so we are hooked up to Regrid's system through an API. And if there is a change in the owner field for a parcel, we will create a notification and let you know that that happened. And then we will also outline that on the map for you so that you understand where on your property that occurred. All right. Is there a way to apply a lookout policy to all properties within a portfolio rather than going into each one by one? Great question. So the way that you would do that is after you've created your policy, set your thresholds, you'll just select all properties here, and that will pull all properties from that portfolio into this list. And if you want to remove or edit any of them and then click finish, that will enroll all of them at once. Let's see. There's also a question about what plans have access to this feature. This is available for standard and enterprise Lens plans. I'll go ahead and paste in the chat, or maybe my colleague can do that as well. Oh, no, I can do it. Okay. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and paste our plans page if you want to take a look. This is available for folks who have Lens Standard or Lens Enterprise. All right, we are at time, so I'm going to cut it here and we'll follow up with anyone who has questions that we haven't answered live, but really appreciate everyone's time. The door is open if you have follow-up questions or other thoughts for us, but we really appreciate you coming today to learn more about lookouts and hope that you find value in Lens and in this feature in the future. Thanks, everyone.